Good afternoon, everybody. We just hit start broadcast mode and attendees are starting to kind of filter in. So I wanted to take a moment to welcome you to today's call, which is being brought to you by the Pennsylvania Community on Transition. My name is Hillary Mangus, and I want to thank you for joining us today. The Pennsylvania Community on Transition is a state leadership team which consists of representatives from the state departments of education, Department of Health, Department of Labor and Industry, Department of Human Services, various serving agencies, young adults, parent organizations, advocates, higher education, and employers. The shared vision and common goals of the Pennsylvania Community on Transition is achieved when all Pennsylvania youth and young adults with disabilities successfully transition to the role of productive and participating adult citizens, are empowered to recognize their talents, strengths, and voice, and have equal access to resources that will promote their full participation in the communities of their choice. This webinar series was designed to assist individuals of all abilities think about their life experiences that they need to move ahead in life. Throughout the series, a cross-agency panel, including the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, the Office of Developmental Programs, the Peel Center, Patton, and the Pennsylvania Youth Leadership Network, or PYLN representatives, will provide participants with information on what IEP teams and students need to know and do regarding setting a vision for a meaningful life, how to identify and find support, and how to discover what it takes for students to live the lives they want to live. Charting the Life Course and the LifeCourseTools.com is a project of the University of Missouri-Kansas City Institute for Human Development, Missouri's University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities Education, Research, and Services, and is endorsed by the Pennsylvania Department of Health and Human Services and supported by the Pennsylvania Community on Transition. Today's is part 4 of the series, Planning for the Life Course, Independent Living. For those of you on the webinar, I want to remind you that we are using Zoom webinar for today's presentation. The webinar is being recorded and will be archived on the Patton website. If you have questions, please use the chat feature that you can ask questions directly to the panel. This is going to be monitored by staff. All participants are muted for the webinar, so please use these features if you have questions. We are not offering Act 48 nor CRC today. I want to take a moment to show you how to access the archived webinar series as well as the handouts for today's session. They can be found on the Patton website under the Pennsylvania Community on Transition 2018-2019 Community on Transition webinar series. And you'll see the archived webinars from within the series. And if you scroll to the bottom of the page, the handouts are here, PA Community of Practice on Transition Webinar Series for PDF. I will also post a link to that in the chat. And at this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Amy Millar of the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services, where she serves as the Supporting Family Statewide Initiative Coordinator. Hi, Amy, thank you.
Thank you so much, Hillary. And thank you to everyone that is here today on the webinar as we discuss charting the life course for an everyday life and around. So, Hillary, if you could advance the next slide, please. So today we're going to be discussing the National Community Practice, Supporting Families Through the Lifespan, focusing on independent living. We're also going to take you through some of the fundamental beliefs of the Life Course framework and how they support independent living. If you've joined us for past webinars, we've touched on this throughout, so we will be brief in that, but we want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to kind of have an understanding of what the Life Course framework is all about, as well as introduce you to some of the Life Course tools that we have mentioned in previous webinars and also for today, and how we can use them to support students and families to envision and plan for their post-secondary dreams in the context of the life domains. Then we're going to share with you a lot of resources for today. So after the webinar, please feel free, as Hillary pointed out, to visit the website so that you can see this, so that you have access to all of those resources that we will be discussing today. So after high school, a lot of times we're presented with a lot of different variety of options and things that we need to be thinking about. And so today we're going to be talking about in the context of independent living after high school. So let's go to the next slide, please. The core belief for the community of practice and for us here in Pennsylvania is that all people and their families have the right to live, love, work, I always add learn, play, and pursue their life aspirations in their community. We really want to ensure that this is applicable to all people, not just students and individuals with disabilities, but all people. We don't want to self-segregate ourselves, and so we must become presumed members of the community. And to do that, we need to believe that all people have this inherent right. Here in Pennsylvania, a large part of our initiatives of how we support that is through our everyday lives, values, and actions. You can go to the next slide. We have 12 of our values and actions, and many of them apply to what we're going to be talking about today. But specifically, when it comes to the community of practice, as we've mentioned in former webinars, is we fall under that value of number 4 of supporting families throughout the lifespan. So that it's not just once and done, that this is something that we can do throughout to support individuals and families. Go to the next one. And so what this really points out is that the vast majority of people with disabilities in Pennsylvania do live with their family, and families need support in order to make an everyday life possible. Families need information, resources, and training. They need connections with other families, supports, and services. Listening to people with disabilities and their families is key to providing supports that help them achieve an everyday life. And so this is something that we strive for, and the way in which we go about this is through our community of practice initiative of supporting families through the lifespan. The next one, please.
I would just add from an educational planning process how important it is to make sure that families are part of the planning process, because they continue to be the student's IEP team member after high school. And so, you know, getting that good family support and working collaboratively with families and really engaging them in meaningful discussions. And that's what this tool really does nicely, is engages families in meaningful discussions and provides them resources, really does provide a great tool to ensure better participation in the IEP planning process.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I also want to touch on for here about number 10, which is expanding options for community living, expanding the range of housing options in the community so that all people can live where and with whom they want to live. And it goes on, but I think that that's really important that we talk about that today a little bit. It's about that we need to be listening to people with disabilities and their families, as well as those that support them around affordable and accessible housing, finding housemates, identifying resources and supports, and beyond. And also,
and these are
go ahead.
These are really great tools for discussion for that independent living goal in the IEP transition plan, specifically because we tend to think of either they're going to live independently or they're not. But there are many options within that continuum, and this really does prompt that discussion. Okay, what do they need in order to live the life that they want to lead? And so that really can help guide that conversation around what services and activities can we be focusing on in order to ensure that student or that youth has the best access to the lifestyle that they want to have.
Absolutely. And with that is also number 11, increasing community participation. And it goes back to our core belief that all people have this right. You know, we often talk about that when many of us were to go to Target, we don't announce that we are now going into the community. However, often when we talk about individuals with disabilities, we will say today they're going into the community, because it's not a presumption that they're a valued member of the community, that they're entering something that they're not a part of. And so we want to change that and increase community participation for not only just to be a part of the community, but meaningful roles in the community, as well as we're going to talk about the social and spirituality aspects, healthy living, and the advocacy role and having a valued role as well in our community today. Next one. So here is just a little bit of some of the data around level of choice where a person lives does matter. And so this is kind of breakdown about choice making around this, as well as if we look here about the relationships around people with intellectual disabilities and autism say that they have friends who are not family or staff. And it's really important that we talk about that today as well, about how important it is to have those relationships in our lives as we look at not only housing and employment and beyond, but having, again, that valued role in the community and being independent. You can go to the next one, Hillary. So these are the life course principles. We talked a little bit already about the idea of our core belief of all people have this right to live, love, learn, and play in their communities. We're also going to talk a little bit today about the family system and cycle, and talking about the different life stages, the trajectory of what's going on in our life, what we want and what we don't across those life stages. We're going to talk about the life outcomes of how we get there. And that involves the life domains of the ways in which we live our lives. We'll touch later on the 3 buckets. This is what we refer to about what families and individuals actually need to support their life within their life domains. And then integrating supports is a key principle of the Life Course framework. But it's not just about the service system delivery of supports, but an integration of all different facets of supports, including a person's personal strengths and assets, the relationships, technology, and community. And then, of course, embedding it in our policies and systems. You can go to the next one. I've mentioned this quote throughout this webinar. I think it is so important when we're talking about transition planning for young people, is that the most powerful force in changing transition outcomes for young people with significant disabilities is not ultimately found in the transition plans we craft, educational services we offer, the instruction we provide, or the system that we build, but rather in the expectations and aspirations individual parents hold for their sons and daughters. All of these other efforts are no doubt essential, but absent families equipped with a clear, compelling vision for a good life after high school, we are missing something utterly essential. And that's from Eric Carter from his article of What Matters Most. And the link is there for you to read the whole article. I encourage everyone to read that, especially if you are in that stage of life with transition planning. It's really important to have those high expectations, sets a bar of a caliber of something that we cannot recreate with the service system delivery and plans that we make. Can you go to the next one? And so that takes me into this point, that it is so important for us to have a vision of what a good life is, because having a vision sets the dream, positive expectation for the future. Without a vision, there's no expectation of what the future might look like. And many of us as adults know that there's been points in our lives where we've arrived somewhere, whether it's a job or a relationship or where we're living or what, multiple, maybe the car that we're driving, or how did I get here? This isn't what I wanted. And so we have to have a really clear vision of what we want in our lives so that that can set the stage for the planning all along. Go to the next one. So that leads into talking about those life stages in a trajectory. The Life Course framework is fundamentally rooted on identifying what is my vision for an everyday life. What is that going to look like? How am I going to get there? And then also with that, the flip of that is, what do I know that I don't want in my life? Because it's just as important to give a name to what we want as it is of what we don't want. Because often if we don't identify that, that's a lot of times where we were. And if we don't identify that, someone else may come along, the student and the individual or the family, and say, this is for you. Or that's not for you. You can't have that. And so this really sets the stage for that. And this can be started at any stage. We always encourage families that the best time to start planning for your child, of course, is at birth, sometimes before birth, of course, right? The second best time to start is today. So that's what we really want to encourage you with the Life Course framework, is that, of course, starting early is the best possible time to start. The very next possible time to start is today. And it's applicable at all life stages. The next one, please. So we can't talk about what we want and what we don't and our life goals without talking about experiences in those natural transitions. And part of this web series is all about that transition planning for young people. And there's many natural life experiences that are happening regardless of whether or not a student has a disability. And so these are the opportunities and experiences that can shape the way in which we get to what we want. and also can impact how quickly we do, and if we're going to have some barriers. And it starts even very early. Were they included in birthday parties at a young age? Were they playing sports? Have they learned to say no? Did they have chores and allowances? I talk often in my role about my son and the fact that I did not really push for him to have the same expectations as his sister growing up. I was so in survival mode. My son was diagnosed with autism. The things like teaching him to fold his clothes and put them away and help unload the dishes and put them away on the table were daunting and challenging tasks to help him with. But now I have a 12-year-old that's allergic to the dishwasher. So, and it's not because he has autism. It's because I failed to really support him in doing his chores. It took longer to support him. And so often I would choose to do it to save time. And now it's costing me a lot more energy and time to try to teach him at 12 than it would have been at 3. And so again, same thing applies here. Well, if you didn't do it the first time, best time to do it when they were young, the next best time to start is today. So we can go to the next one. I think it's important that we talk about the fact that, as we all know, life comes with its bumps. And this is such a great quote. I love it so much about giving up on your goal because of a setback is like slashing your other 3 tires because you got a flat. And we often do that with planning, don't we? We often, we hit a road. That doesn't work, or this didn't work. And so now I just give up. And so we don't want to do that. So when you have talked about your vision and your expectations of what you want, what you don't, we can actually choose to get back on track and say, okay, we hit that. Now, this doesn't have to become a life sentence. So we can go to the next slide. So I wanted to share a little story really quickly with you. This is my daughter, Michaela. Actually, a year ago in March, she was in the ICU at Children's Hospital here in Philadelphia, and she had an asthma attack that had unfortunately led her to full respiratory failure. And it was a very challenging time for our family. And there were moments during that I really did not believe that we were going to get to keep this really amazing human. And before this incident, my daughter has overcome many other challenges and was talking about going out for the softball team at her middle school. And she just loves softball and she really wanted to do this. And when this happened, we really felt like softball was no longer going to be on the table, not just for last year, but sports in general may not be on the table anymore after her respiratory failure. And she worked really hard. She had this on her trajectory as a goal that she really wanted to be able to get strong enough that she could. And just last week, I got that text from her saying that she had made the team. And it was just a really proud moment. But I think back to just a year ago, that was totally impossible. There was no way this kid was going to play softball. And so think about that, whatever it is in your life, what's going on in your life that makes you feel like that other thing is off the table because of our current situation. And so continue to plan, continue to get back on track, because there may just be other creative ways to get there. So turn that impossible into possible. Go to the next one. So how does the life course come into play? And this is really about bolstering high expectations. We know historically some of the barriers are that they didn't always have as many choices to work within their communities, people with disabilities, and that low expectations and focus on limitations rather than strengths. Also, some of the barriers that we've had in the past for individuals with disabilities, low employer expectations, and sub-minimum wage was an area of need. Moving forward, we really want to champion around this to create breaking down those barriers, and that really begins with a dream and empowering the person and their family that they are the ones driving this to have those high expectations. You can go to the next one. So the life course framework, what is it all about? It starts with those principles that we've already discussed, and they're really those conversation starters. I think back to my daughter, Michaela. She has many specialists at Children's Hospital, and we bring her trajectory with her in her one-page profile, and she utilizes these tools to kind of start the conversation with her providers. One of the best things that I love about it is it's empowered her as an advocate, and so when a doctor or a nurse starts talking to me, she'll say, can you please talk to me? And so she's become more empowered to speak up. She also lets me know when I need to be quiet and let her lead the meetings and the appointments as well. These are also opportunities to problem solve together as a family and with a team, and it encourages the creation ownership of the vision. And we truly can use this by anyone in any setting, and it focuses on all the stages of the lifespan. So let's now go into the framework on the next slide. When we're doing this, let's also talk about the 3 buckets. This is about when I mentioned earlier with the principles of what families need. And so one of the buckets is discovery and navigation. That's information and training. So like this web series would fall under that. This is what families and individuals need to really discover and learn more and navigate what's out there. The front and center bucket is the connecting and networking bucket. And this is all about talking to someone that's been there, finding out where do I go in my community, who's already been there, what family has already gone through this process with this community college or with this service provider. And then also, lastly, the bucket in the back is the goods and services, and this relates to our day-to-day needs, medical, financial. This doesn't all necessarily need to be disability related. This could be broad things like going through the DMV and driver's license, knowing where to go and how to get that and what they need to support their everyday lives. So we want to make sure that we're filling up families and individuals' buckets. Go to the next one. Life domains are a large aspect of that life course framework. And so we're going to discuss today around independent living, different resources and options under each of the life domains. Because when we talk about independent living, it's really encompassing how we live our lives within these life domains. So that's our daily life and employment. What are we doing without our day, but as far as it's related to school and education, employment, volunteering, our routines. Next is our community living options. What is out there for my student and my family? What might work, what might not work? And then social and spirituality, friendships, relationships, leisure activities, personal networks, faith communities. What are we doing as far as where we're connected in the community socially and spiritually? Healthy living relates to our medical, behavior, and nutritional wellness, making sure people have affordable care. This is our healthy living and thinking about I think about this as our emotional well-being as well. Safety and security. This is our emergency preparedness, our well-being, our legal rights, guardianship would fall under this if that's something that you're considering, and other alternatives to that as well. It's really important to understand and know what your options are. Then lastly, citizenship and advocacy. What is my valued role? This is all about making choices, setting goals, responsibilities, and leadership and peer support. And we'll hear from some of our partners throughout the rest of this presentation under these different life domains.
I think this is a really great slide because it does make the point of what we were kind of alluding to earlier, which is we in the education field traditionally think of independent living as where is the student going to live in a transition part of the IEP. And it's so much more than that. And so, you know, you hit on it. Can they make the right medical decisions? Can they meaningfully participate in community activities or spirituality? Do they know how to access the things in their community that they need for support? And so just those items in parentheses following each of those titles really does lend itself to conversation that IEP teams could be having about services and activities that could be meaningfully added in a student's transition plan in their IEP, so that you can begin to say, okay, if the goal is live independently, what all does that youth need to do to get there? They need to learn, you know, how to contact their doctor and make an appointment if they're sick, or how to follow up on medicine. So there's, again, so much more to it that we need to be mindful of all of the pieces that make someone independent in the community.
Thank you, Hillary. So if we could go to the next slide. So now we're going to go into each of the life domains of the Life Course Framework, and we're going to take some time with our different panelists that are now on the call to talk about the different life domains. Right now, let's talk about that daily life and employment, which is a lot of what Hillary was alluding to. One of the big resources, and I'll share it at the end of the presentation, is our questions and answer booklet, which is a resource guide that we have here through the Life Course Framework, and we'll make sure that you have links to it as well. And so this is just a snippet of some of the questions that fall under daily life and employment that we could be talking about during transition time or any life stage. So they have these different questions around daily life and employment in all of the life domains. I'm going to show you an example under each of the life domains, but here is the one for daily life and employment when it's related to transition. So when we're talking about individual and family life, employment, and education, here are some prompting questions. So even though we might not know all of the answers for that particular student, or even in a broad sense, we can at least start the conversation by saying questions like, if I want to go to college, are you helping me find scholarships or other funding sources? Another question under employment is, are you helping me learn how to apply for a job and gain experience in jobs that interest me? Another one is, does my transition plan balance work experience, social skills, and academics according to my needs and desires and abilities? One of the other questions here under individual and family life is, do I have responsibilities at home, school, and in the community? What does my ideal day look like? What about my week? What makes a bad day for me? When things that I'm going to want to avoid. So these are some of those questions that not only families can be having and talking about having a dialogue with their student and their loved one, but also transition coordinators and anyone that's a part of someone's transition planning team. I think is really important that this is a book that's a great little resource guide that you can flip to and say, okay, we're talking about daily life and employment. Let's talk about some of these things, and then come up with some questions that are more relatable to the individual. Go to the next one. So here is just kind of a synopsis of some ideas of where you might find some resources. And this would be traditionally found in through your IEP for your transition planning, the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, who is on the call today and will be sharing with us momentarily, Employment Services, CareerLink, Works for Me, Post-Secondary School, Home and Community-Based Waivers, Center for Independent Living, Social Security Administration, and the PA Family Network offers workshops and mentoring to help you plan for your daily life and employment. So these are some things to be thinking about. Have I reached out? Do I understand what the benefits are and what are things to support my student and this family? So Hillary, do you want to just touch on this one briefly?
Sure. So this slide actually comes from what was on the Experience the Employment Connection transition roadmap. And so it really just, it's meant to provide you with a description about what all of the different agencies can provide to people. And they are currently working on a new format for the Experience the Employment Connection transition roadmap. And so once that is updated, it'll be housed on our patent website as well as on the Experience the Employment Connection website. But it really does just talk to you about all of the different times when those agencies can be involved and what they're planning for, and really to think for IEP teams to think beyond maybe just OVR for a student, because transition planning does really call us to provide links to resources for all of the different agencies that may be of benefit to a youth as they transition out of school. So that the intention of this really is to just say there are different services within each of these organizations that could be accessed and provided based on a student's individual needs.
Thank you. Go to the next one. So if our partners from OVR, if you would like to introduce yourselves and take us through a lot of what OVR has to offer under daily life and employment for students transitioning and thinking about independent living.
So this page just gives you the access to OVR's Facebook and is reminding you that you can follow OVR on Facebook or also via LinkedIn. And so some of the services that they would be providing that are available to OVR customers are listed on this site. And when we think of traditionally transition age youth in the high school setting, we're thinking of the pre-employment transition services, which is why it's highlighted in blue, but they do so much more. But that being said, they provide an array of services, including the diagnostic services to determine what supports an individual might need, a vocational evaluation, career counseling and guidance, pre-employment transition services, the restoration services, placement services, supported employment financial aid for training, and assistive technology and business services. So under WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA of 2014, OVR is required to provide job exploration and counseling, work-based learning experiences, counseling on opportunities for enrollment in comprehensive transition or post-secondary education programs at institutions of higher education, workplace readiness training to help develop social skills and independent living, and instruction in self-advocacy. So a little bit about what the independent living skills instruction looks like. That is provided in a group instruction format, and it's meant to give students with disabilities access to community services and supports that increase self-reliance and self-confidence in the workplace. Some of the things that they may work on would include budgeting and finances specific to the way they relate to employment, housing options, how to obtain a photo ID or other vital records, internet usage and the impact of social media, transportation methods, laundry and hygiene, safety, nutrition for employment, navigating social services, and managing health needs. Okay, Amy?
Okay, so thank you so much, Hillary. And Melissa is still trying to work on that, so hopefully she'll be able to join us later. One of the other things that I'd like to point out is that here in Pennsylvania, we do have the Family Network, but ODP is very active with the Supporting Families Initiative through our Everyday Lives initiatives and our Community of Practice. And so we really want to help connect students and families to feel empowered, heard, and learn, and so that we can do a lot of planning of this together. So we want to make sure that they're not just getting a job or living independently, but it's also where they want to work and where they're tied in and touching on their personal strengths and assets and where they would choose to live. Go to the next one. And so here's a little bit more about the Family Network. This is their website, and you are able, it is a live link there for you to go to their website to learn more. They also are available on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and are very active in their social media touch points with families and individuals. To the right of the screen is one of the advisors, Krista, and her son, and they often on Sunday nights at 7 o'clock go Facebook Live to just do little 3-minute videos talking about the life course tools of how they've used it in their family around a different theme for that week and that month. So one time she talked about navigating the holidays around sensory needs and utilizing some of the tools. So this is definitely a resource that can help you when you're thinking about your daily life and employment. Go to the next one. So here is a picture of one of the workshops that the Family Network offers. Like I've mentioned in the past, they offer a variety of workshops in the community that are free for families and individuals and students. And then they also do one-on-one mentoring. And so some of the different workshops that they do is they do a specific workshop on transition planning for families. And then they do an overview of the life course framework and creating your vision for an everyday life. We do community safety, and we most recently launched our healthy sexual relationships workshop for families and individuals from the Family Network. And we also provide one-on-one mentoring if a workshop is not ideal for you, and even in conjunction with it. And it is all free for families in Pennsylvania. So their information is there, and I encourage you to get on their newsletter and to hear what's going on. And if you don't see on their calendar a workshop near you, please let us know and we can work with you to create one. So with that, let's move into the community living life domain, which refers to our housing, living options, home adaptations, modifications, community access, and transportation. We don't have time today to go into a whole lot of things, but I do want to touch on some different ideas. So we go to the next one. So here again is the page from our questions and answers booklet, and this is around community living. And so when we think about transition, some of the questions that we could be asking is, will I continue to live in our family home after graduation? Have you helped me begin to explore different living options? Have we even talked about it? Or do mom and dad have a particular idea in mind and that's what we're doing? Or has those that are supporting the individual and the student have certain ideas of where they would be living? Have they articulated where they would like to live? And so these are some of those questions that families and teams can be talking about in the planning process to prepare for understanding what it will happen. And then as addendum to that, accommodations and access. Have you helped me figure out what kind of supports I'll need to either continue living at home or move into my own place after graduation? What supports might I need to live away from home while attending college? And then as it relates to transportation, am I learning how to get around in my community? Am I learning to drive, ride the bus, take a cab? I have a brief story about my son Noah again. And then, sorry about that, folks. My son Noah has a best friend, Robert, who was down the street from us, and the boys were very inseparable. And then we moved away, but only about 3 miles away. But we were in a different school district, and so the boys want to see each other more often. And Robert's father and I had talked many times about getting the boys together. And it's very easy for us to drive the boys 3 miles up the road, and it's literally 2 turns from the new home to our old neighborhood. And so it's very easy, very quick. It's about a 5-minute ride. But we also want to make sure that our boys are preparing and getting ready for navigating public transportation, and that this would be a skill that both boys would need to learn. And having autism can be challenging. They don't have a lot of good safety awareness. This is something that they struggle with personally. And so we've been working on a goal to teach the boys how to navigate the SEPTA bus system, because there is a bus stop outside of the end of Robert Street and a bus stop at the end of our street. And so we've been working with the boys to read the bus schedules and understand where to stand and how you need to do that and how to navigate that and how to communicate when it's time to get off, making sure that you're paying attention to the route, how to interact with the driver, how to use your SEPTA keypad. So there's all these elements of this, right? And all this time that goes into it. This is something for about a year now we've been working on the boys, and the goal is by the end of this summer, we'd really like them to be able to actually take the bus without one of us. Now, the bus ride and doing all of that, walking down the bus stop and stop, the boys are looking at anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes to make that transition. But the skills that they're gaining through that process are going to serve them so much more in their planning for independent living after high school than his father and myself driving the 2 boys to each other's homes, if that makes sense of why it's so important to start talking about these things. So we can go to the next slide. Some of the resources and things to be considering when talking about community living is talking about this at the IEP. It's very important to discuss what independent living supports do we have or do we need. Reaching out to the Centers for Independent Living, home and community-based waiver services can help to provide owning a home, life sharing, group homes, home modifications as well. And we will be hearing from Mr. Ron Molesky from ODP in just a moment on one of those options, life sharing in a moment. Some other things to consider is reaching out to the Housing Authority. What could HUD and vouchers and et cetera, their programs offer students that are looking to live independently after high school? The Self-Determination Housing Project of Pennsylvania is another resource. Transportation Services, SEPTA offers a variety of supports and things here in the Philadelphia area, and they are duplicated in other transportation. So it can be often confusing to navigate what would be the best option. Should my loved one live at home? Should we work towards living independently? And so we want to make sure that you have the knowledge and the capacity to understand that there's a variety of options, and not all of them will work for you, and what works for you may not work for a different family. And so let's continue to have the dialogue around the different options and make sure that people have access to them. So life sharing refers to the manner of living where individuals with and without intellectual distinctions, share life experiences, explore personal growth, and pursue individual goals by living together in a common household. In the life sharing model, a provider agency enrolled with ODP contracts with people with who wish to share their lives and serve as host homes. Individual with an intellectual distinction is then matched with the host home. The host home provides the life sharing HCBS waiver, the home and community-based service waiver, services to the individual, and the provider pays the host home in the manner specified by their contract. So the provider then submits a claim in our system, the Promise system, for payment to the agency. And so I know that was a little bit of service system delivery kind of language there, but essentially when the host home decides that they would like to be that, they enroll, the provider agency is enrolled with us, and then they are supported. And then they are reimbursed for the services that they provide, the supports they provide to the individual that is utilizing that service. And so this is a great way to expand what independent living could look like without staying in the person's traditional biological home. And so one of the fundamental goals of life sharing is to forge enduring and permanent relationships as the foundation for learning life skills, developing self-esteem, learning to exist in interdependence with others. To achieve this and other goals requires proximity and integration. For this reason, life-sharing homes are limited to no more than 2 individuals. So this is not meant to be a group home model. This is meant to truly reflect how many young people, and doesn't require age. It's not saying that it's limited to age, but a lot of people often have roommates and share a home. So this is a way to provide that inner communities to support those with intellectual distinctions. We can go to the next slide. I'm hoping Ron will be able to join us, but we'll keep going. Just go back one. Okay. So here are some of the benefits, and this allows for more one-on-one attention to the individual's needs and desires. But the life-sharing host home is not necessarily, this would not be someone they're not necessarily providing like nursing care. This is they're sharing their life in their home with them. So life-sharing participants are integrated into all aspects of the host home household just as they would in a private home. So this is sharing responsibilities in the household. As an active member of the host home household, both individuals and life sharers benefit from their shared life experience. That reciprocal role between the host family and the individual. The relationship established through the life sharing are symbolic in nature. Everyone achieves personal growth throughout their interactions with one another. By learning how to live as a member of a household, life-sharing participants acquire the life skills necessary for independent living, such as personal finance, social interaction, household maintenance. We can go to the next one.
Ron is still having issues with his phone, but he did ask me to mention that the QM activities consistently show that people in LA have the highest level of satisfaction if they're participating in the life sharing.
That's really great. Thank you, Ron and Hillary. So there is a life sharing coalition here in Pennsylvania, and it's a wonderful group comprised of providers, host families, self-advocates, ODP, life sharing leads, and beyond. And they put on every year the Pennsylvania Life Sharing Conference. And so I did want to kind of put a plug in there for this, but also a plug for you to visit the website. If you click on the link for the save the date, it's going to take you to the Life Sharing Coalition's website, so you can learn a little bit more about life sharing and explore this as a possibility for your student as you're doing your transition planning as a community living option. So we can go to the next one.
One more thing about the life sharing from Ron is that it's a good way to transition out of the family home, which is consistent with the natural life course, just like a neurotypical person would be moving into his first independent living arrangement.
Thank you. And thank you, Ron, for joining us, even though we weren't able to hear you. And thank you, Hillary, for navigating that for us. So as we move into healthy living, which is really our medical, behavioral, nutritional wellness aspects, I just wanted to pause for a second that if there were any of our other panelists that had things that they would like to just hop in on this one, if you could just make sure that your audio is working properly so that we can continue to move forward. So Heather, can you go to the next one?
This is Melissa. I just want to see if you guys can hear me now.
Oh, we can. Welcome, Melissa.
We can.
Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you, Hillary, for going over the slides. I will be ready for the next round.
Great, wonderful. So good that it's working now, Melissa. Thank you. So here is again that excerpt from our question and answers booklet through the Life Force framework. So here's some questions around healthy living that I think often, we're so focused on employment and where will an individual live and educational supports, but we need to talk about healthy living as well. It's so important that we talk about this. What do I need to know about the process of transitioning to adult health care? This is a huge one. Some of the other key ones are you helping me prepare and understand puberty? This is a big one. Do I feel comfortable asking you or trusted adults about the changes in my body as I become an adult? Have you talked to me about birth control and reproductive health? Now, a lot of times these are questions that can be difficult, challenging for families and for teams and even for self-advocates and students to navigate. I mean, we all remember what it was like having some of these kinds of conversations with our parents. I'm sure some of us are kind of laughing. But I think that it's important. And again, I do want to plug the Family Network. Their healthy relationships and sexuality training, or workshop, I shouldn't say training, is a great place to kind of help facilitate those conversations around healthy living, which you guys have connections to. GOT Transition, the National Youth Transition Center, PA Medical Home Project, Transition Healthcare Checklist, which is a great thing to be making sure that you are going through what you need to do. Your local hospitals and medical community are a huge asset here. Family Network, as I mentioned, and of course our HICUs here in Pennsylvania offer a variety of trainings and resources and guides, conversation starters and tools that families and students and professionals can utilize when navigating healthy living. So this is one thing that I found that I thought would be a good thing to mention here is that when it comes to this, thinking about healthy living, there are healthy living groups. And this is an example from Me Up in the Pittsburgh area. You can look, but you can do this across the state and look for groups and calendars of events when it comes to that. So this is a lot of physical activities, staying well, yoga, mindfulness, things like that are really important when we're talking about healthy living. We go to the next slide, please. I think it's important when I mentioned too about connecting to your medical community. For our family, we are very connected to Jefferson and Einstein Healthcare Network and the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, as I mentioned earlier. With my daughter having a variety of specialists and medical needs, being connected to our medical community has been a great asset to us in planning for her transition into high school and making sure that we have the supports that we need, that we have the education that we need as a family to go through that. This may look differently for you in the different parts of our state, but just from my perspective, this is where we've been connected to our medical community as a family working on transition. Next one.
So there is a question, Amy. A user asked if you could indicate if there's a coordinator in the community that can help support a family or individual with transition besides the transition coordinator in the school. I'm thinking is what they're asking. She said the information being presented is excellent, but could be overwhelming for a family where parents need to work or have other children, etc.
Absolutely. So, well, one is that the Family Network offering the one-on-one mentoring, that is someone that can help connect you to a lot of those supports. Also, our county offices are part of our regional collaboratives, and many of them, I can speak to the fact that in Lackawanna County, we do have a community special navigator, and we're working on developing more pilots across the state for there to be more community navigators out in the community helping connect families to that. But the county office often has some resources as well. So not just your transition coordinator through the school, who should be well connected, especially even through their transition councils and things like that to connect the family. But one of the things that, I touched upon about those Facebook Live videos and being connected in other ways, because you're right, a lot of families do work and it's difficult to get out to offices or to webinars or workshops that are not always available. So thank you for that question. I did want to also just point about the HICUs. They are across our state, and so here's the map, and it kind of just tells you a little bit more about it. It's really great the work that they've been doing around healthy living and supporting independent living across our state from a healthcare standpoint. Next one. This was a resource that I came across when we're talking about healthy living. Is just Giant Food Stores is across most of our state, and they do these wellness walks. And I do believe that Martin Foods and some of our other grocery store providers across our state have similar programs where planning for healthy living in transition. So we're going to move now into safety and security, which is all about emergency well-being, making sure that we understand our rights and issues, talking about guardianship options and alternatives. So we'll go to the next one. So here again are some of the questions, and I'm going to just go through a couple of them. We're talking about personal safety. Are you helping me get training and knowledge on safety and security issues? Would a limited or joint bank account with automatic bill pay or debit card help me learn money management skills? Do I know who to call or tell if I'm being bullied or victimized? Do I know when and how to call for help at home or in the community? This is really important. So disaster planning, emergency preparedness, this is such a key part of having to be able to facilitate independent living for students after high school. Some of the other questions here are, how will you know if I need a guardian when I turn 18, or if there are other ways to help me stay safe? That doesn't necessarily always have to be the option for families. So families have to understand that there are other options that don't necessarily include guardianship. Does my transition plan include learning skills to be my own person and not need a guardian for decision making? Are you considering my safety and protection without making me overly dependent or taking away my rights to be self-determined? Do I understand the concept of money management, and how can you help me learn to manage my finances? So again, these are just a couple examples of questions that families and teams and individuals can be having and talking about when thinking about independent living. Next one, please. So here are a couple of these resources. The Special Needs Registry, something that would help you navigate emergency responsiveness with responders by identifying your home. The Yellow Dot system is something that is here in Pennsylvania that you can contact and get more information on to utilize that. The PA Assistive Technology Foundation, there are a million apps out there, as we all know, in GPS technology that can help, that have really opened up the door for people with disabilities to have more access to the community and independent living and beyond, just by using those generic apps. And those smart home technology is a huge one. Legal decision making, making sure that families have access to understanding where to go when they have questions about power of attorneys and guardianship and supported decision making. Life planning is very important from a financial standpoint for the family and for the individual. Self-advocacy skills is really important when we're talking about in the IEP goals and other resources. Again, the Family Network, we have an entire workshop created to talk with families about community safety, and so much of this is about this particular life domain. And again, the HICUs have a plethora of pre-designed workshops, resources, and guides around community safety. Go to the next slide, please.
With regard to assistive technology as well, we have assistive technology consultants in each of the 3 patent offices, and we have a lending program. So if people are looking to trial assistive technology, they can contact the regional patent office and work with one of the consultants to help identify some assistive technology that they may be interested in trialing with an individual as well.
So, and why this is so important is this is a statistic that has always been just really difficult for me, is that people with disabilities are sexually assaulted 7 times more than people without disabilities. And so this is something that we want to make sure that when we're talking about safety and security in the context of independent living for all students, but particularly for those with disabilities, it's very important that we are planning and ensuring that people understand their rights, and personal safety is a huge part of this, of being prepared. And again, I can't stress it enough that the workshops that are designed by family members for family members around community safety is we spend a lot of time talking about this and creating plans for families and self-advocates. Go to the next page. Person with a disability is more likely to suffer from police brutality, particularly because of the manifestation of their disability can be misunderstood as defiant behavior. We've had this in our own experience with our son, and so it is important that talking about that registry and the yellow dot system and other things that you can utilize to be prepared and to communicate, especially when a person may not be able to communicate verbally or that their behaviors may be misinterpreted. Some of the things that we can talk about in this area is making sure that we learn those safety skills and ways to protect ourselves, and that we may, some people may not have anyone to advocate for them, so they need to make sure to decrease their victimization risk that they are strong advocates or have those that can help advocate for them. And the next one. These are just a quick little synopsis, and these are just snippets of that workshop that I was telling you about, is that these are some of those signs that someone may be being victimized: memory loss, breaks, bruises, social isolation, weight loss, banking changes, personality changes, behavioral changes, giving away their belongings. So these are things that all of us should be aware of as professionals and as family members to recognize the signs of someone being victimized. Go to the next one. Here are some important phone numbers for you to report abuse. Looking at it for Childline, and then Adult Protective Services are for those that are over the age of or a young adult until end of life. We can go to the next one. Again, I can't point it out enough that community safety is a huge part of supporting someone in this life domain. And so if you see something, you need to say something as well. And please reach out to the Family Network if you are interested in having mentoring around this particular topic, or if you would like to have a workshop on this particular please let us know. You can go to the next one. Making a plan is really important. I'm going to keep moving because of time, so make sure that we get to everything. So that's just something there as your resource. You can go to the next one. This is just a quick example of what a family had done as part of their personal safety plan. Was that the mom of an individual had printed out the Google map, and her son is nonverbal, can often elope and get out, but he has a couple of favorite spots that he does know how to get to from the house. And so, but in an emergency or in that panic mode, when her son had eloped or was missing, she used to not really be able to think or trying to describe to someone or a first responder of where these places were. And so she keeps on track, and everyone that works with her son has a copy of this Google map, which is where he likes to pass, and it has expedited locating Michael for his safety. So this is something to think about if that is something that is a concern for your student, is that having an idea of, well, where do they normally like to go? Do they have places that they know where they can get to from where they were? And having that readily available can truly be life-saving. You can go to the next one, please. So we're going to move into social and spirituality. Hillary, I'm not sure if I don't think I see anyone from PYLN on the call, so we can use their website and things when we get to that point. But social spirituality, we all know this from our own lives. It's important to feel connected and a sense of belonging. Friendships is a huge part of personal growth and feeling independent in our communities. Can you go to the next slide, please? These are a couple of questions that we could be talking about. Are you helping me use social media to be included and keeping in touch with friends more easily? Sometimes social media, while there can be dangers, can also open up the door for more connection, especially if someone utilizes chat, video. There are numerous ways in which we can stay connected to one another with modern technology in ways that we couldn't before. Some of the other questions here to consider is, am I involved with a youth or young adult group in my faith community, if that's something that's important to you? Am I connected to groups in the LGBTQ community? Are there opportunities to make my own choices? Have you asked me if I want to be involved in other activities that are less inclusive as well? So have we talked about that? Am I supported to express my own sexuality and choices? So this is when we're talking about social spirituality, some things that we can consider. Can go to the next slide. Again, here are some resources, social media, the library is a huge place to get connected, volunteer groups. The meetup group that I showed you earlier is a great one, friendship circle, hobbies clubs, getting involved in the fire department is a huge one. Again, there is many different connections through the waivers and the family network, as well as our other partners that are on the call today. Go to the next
Amy,
one.
it's Hillary. I just wanted to jump in. I know Janine Schultz from the Peel Center, when we had done our planning call, had attended to be on this call. And one of the examples she gave about this, social aspect was the importance for her daughter, Kate, where her peer group, when she was graduating from high school, was leaving to go to college. And so one of the things that they worked on with Kate was learning how to use FaceTime on her phone and how to send texts and everything. And so she uses FaceTime and learned that skill so that while her friends are at college, she's able to communicate with them and then now and maintain those natural peer friendships that she had when she was in school. Because for an individual, that those peer groups could go away because they're moving on to the next phase of their life, which may not be staying in the same community. And she talked about how really important it was for Kate to maintain those friendships. And to this day, those girls are still her group of friends. And when they come home from college, because they're able to text and use FaceTime, they'll come and pick her up and take her out into the community, and they meet up and go to restaurants and go, even so far as to have a drink together now that she's 21. So just a great way, and that importance of using social media to stay connected to peer groups as well.
Yes. So Hillary, if you could go to the Pennsylvania Youth Leadership Network's website and highlight that as a resource as well.
So Pennsylvania Youth Leadership Network is a really great resource, and we typically have a member from PYLN on the phone, except for they are now all also have full-time employment. And so Allie, unfortunately, was not able to join us. But PYLN, they are a youth governing board that provides some training and some social events for youth with disabilities. They work alongside now. They've worked in the past with the Centers for Independent Living, but now are connected with Peel. So they're providing lots of youth empowerment training. But one of the resources that they have on their site is the Healthcare Transition Toolkit and the PYLN Secondary Transition Toolkit. So these are great resources that can be used with youth to help them begin to become engaged in their own transition planning process as well. And they also do a strand at our Secondary Transition Conference on youth engagement. So for anyone who is interested in learning a little bit more about youth engagement and strategies to work on self-determination or self-advocacy in youth, our Secondary Transition Conference through the Community of Practice will be held July 17th and 18th at the Penn Stater, and there is information on the Patton website. So I just wanted to briefly show you where that information is so that you could learn more about that as well.
Great.
Bear with me one moment while I pull over to that. So We don't have registration live yet, but this is information on the conference. And so you will see here a link to a little bit of information about the conference. You can watch the Patent podcast. It'll tell you a little bit about what will be happening this year at the conference. And then once registration is open, the link will be provided at the bottom as well. And in addition, we do youth and family scholarships to the Transition Conference. So those typically post in about May. And so a youth caregiver could apply for a scholarship on their own, or a youth could apply with a family member coming with them to attend the conference. And it's a really great opportunity. I know that we have some sessions that will focus around some of these life course tools as well. So if you're interested in digging a little bit deeper or kind of getting some more information in smaller bits, the Transition Conference might be a great resource for you.
Thank you, Hillary. All right, I also wanted to highlight the idea of time banking and I put it under here. It really can help facilitate all of independent living. And so but I think it's also a great way to stay connected in the community, and it touches into personal strengths and assets that is really important when we're talking about how could we support an individual. And so time banking is a network of people using time as the currency for exchange of services. So person A does something for person B, and then B pays A using time credits, and person A can spend those time credits on recruiting the services of person B or anyone else in the time bank. And so if we go to the next slide, kind of will explain a little bit more. This is actually the Phoenixville area time bank here in Pennsylvania, their website. And so this kind of helps facilitate showing you how it kind of works. And so you would join a time bank in your area, and there are ways to actually create it if there's not one in your area. To do that, you've earned your credits, and then how you spend it, maybe you wanted someone to help you with gardening, or so it's a bartering system on a voluntary basis where people are using their personal strengths and assets and their connections to support others. And so this is a way that can also help create opportunities for connections, social connections, but also supported living connections, I think is really important. And we've talked a lot in the past about that valued role and that reciprocal role, and how it's important that people have that. To have a valued role, I don't just take, I have to give. And so this is I think they have right here, I thought was really cool, is actually this weekend in Phoenixville, there's a time bank orientation coming up. And so I did want to highlight that. And there's members meetings and things like that. So there's a way for you to connect with them on Facebook and things like that if you are in the Phoenixville area. And there are others, I believe, across the state where you can get connected with time banking. Next one.